thank you for everyone for coming. Today, we do have a special show. We have the topic today is demystifying entity data as a product. So special guest, Ansh Kanwar. He's a senior VP here of technology here at Reltio. Mike Frasca, which, you know, if you were on yesterday, then you know that he did a show yesterday as well. By the way, if you're not muted, please mute yourself on the show so that we can make sure that, you know, that there's no interruptions. So the rules of the show, keep yourself on mute. All questions should be asked in chat, or feel free to take yourself off of chat to ask. I will be asking those questions as we kind of go through. Sometimes I will just kind of wait to ask those questions to get through some of the presentation. Some of them might not be able to answer due to confidentiality and or you know, maybe the show went over. So it will be recorded and posted to the community as usual, just like yesterday's show. Next slide. So we've got a really, as I promised yesterday, I would have these up today. So we have some shows coming up. Today's show on demystifying entity data as a product. On the next week, really excited about this update to real-time customer API with Reltio Integration Hub and MuleSoft. And then we're going to do an Ask Me Anything with Michael Burke on how AI is influencing the future of MDM. Should be really good. It's going to be me asking questions and then you asking questions. I love these Ask Me Anythings. And then on the 15th, we'll do MDM, a nursery for data governance. Oof. So we're getting real now. And then we'll do some ABC crosswalks, understanding their purpose and use case, or in their use. Next slide. And I'll be done after this, and I'll let Ansh take over. But Reltio is sponsoring in a big way a data-driven 23. It's a modern data management conference. We want you to sign up. I'll push, the link is there, but I will push that into the chat here shortly. Really excited about this conference. It's going to be in October 3rd through 5th. Be here in Dallas, Texas. I'm in Dallas, so it was perfect for me. That's all I have, Ansh. I'll let you kind of kick it off and go from there.
Thank you, Chris. So it's good to see some very familiar names here on the webinar. If I haven't met you before, let me just quickly introduce myself. So I head up technology for Reltio, part of the exec team reporting to our CEO, Manish Sood. My background is about 23 years of everything cloud. So I've worked for Citrix Systems in the past, building communication systems, kind of like, you know, GoToMeeting, I'm sure is familiar to a lot of you. Spent my early years building and scaling that product and really thinking through what it takes to deliver secure internet scale services in real time, which is experience that's really been coming in handy here at Reltio. Spent some time at LogMeIn around support again, support cloud sort of products. Also included a stint at LastPass, which I'm not very proud of at this point, but you live and you learn, right? And then I've for the last 5 years, I've really been working for smaller companies with the idea that to bring about change in the world, you got to be able to drive fast, and it's just been amazing being at Reltio and seeing the rate of change that we're able to bring to the market. That's me, Mike.
So hey everybody, I'm Mike Frasca. I'm field CTO here at Reltio. Ansh is my boss, so it'd be nice on this call.
Technically I am, but really.
I've been at Reltio since 2016, so I've been here for quite a little while. Prior to Reltio, I have been in the MDM space since about 2010, and working on various on-prem tooling and working primarily in the consulting space.
Very cool. So we're going to make this a discussion, actually, little bit contrary to what Chris said. I would love participation. I see some of you on here, you know, with a massive amount of experience and interest. So I think you all can contribute to this discussion as much as me and Mike can bring to it. So in the spirit of community, please chime in. You know, let's make this a discussion. So with that said, what we're trying to do here is really, convey the message that data as a product, although it's relatively new in the data conversation, we've been tracking it almost since day one, and every time we look at that landscape, we go, we can help customers deliver this today, especially customers, partners who are familiar with the Reltio product. They own licenses to Reltio. You can deliver data as a product today. So how do we back into that and make sure that if delivering data as a product is your success criteria, then you're aware of all the constructs that exist to be able to get to that outcome, right? So we'll spend a little bit of time just sort of framing up data mesh and data as a product, but fairly sort of high level and just to level set, right? But then one level down, how do those requirements map to the capabilities that are present in Reltio? And ultimately, looking at it from a success point of view for our practitioners, how do you deliver that sort of entity-based or customer-based data as a product quickly and effectively using Reltio? So that's the game plan. Everybody's seen the complete chaos slide, right? Data fragmentation. That's what we solve, and this is true for us. This is true for any other data unification type of solution out there. We help you pull data out from all different legacy systems to get past the point-to-point integrations and the inaccuracies and the discrepancies that creep in because that fragmentation, and put data back together so that it can be the trustworthy backbone for anything, any sort of downstream applications that want to consume this data and build either analytical or further operational loops based on that data. So where did this move to movement to the data mesh or data as a product? Like, what problem are we trying to solve with it, right? And I think Zhamak, being the originator and fairy godmother of everything data mesh, if you haven't read the two seminal papers that she put out, I think it was 22 or so, 21 or 22, and they really are a reaction to these massive data warehouses or data lakes at that point. I don't think lake houses were the prevalent term at that point, but really this notion of having big data in a giant lake somewhere or a warehouse, and then having to spend either a lot of energy in getting unstructured data from the lake all the way to the point of consumption, or more structured data warehouse data and being stuck in the decisions that were made while that data warehouse was created. And so it was really a reaction to that monolith and the sort of how hard it is to consume from those monoliths. The other problem was sort of going across the pipeline, right? Every single person in data ingest, process, serve, right? That's what we all do. But when you look at the implementation, especially the organizational implementation of these capabilities, it really started to map to teams, right? There's an ingestion team that accepts data, let's say, from operational systems. There is a team that's in charge of the data warehouse that really is making everything either transforming or munging data together to make it available for the BI systems. And then there's obviously the BI processes, which is usually a separate team, and the bigger the company, the more severe the problem, right? So in a perfect implementation of Conway's law, the pipeline started to get reflected in the organizational structure. And therefore, the further away you were from the origin of the data, the less you knew about the context of the data, and therefore harder it was for you to deliver value, which, it's a perfect mapping to what happens in the software space, where software developers, at least in the past, got further and further away from the core problem or the core context. And the whole agile movement then came into play to try to solve for that, and not get too far away from the target design by being very, very iterative in nature. And Zhamak's claim was that we needed something like that in the data space, to be able to solve this, what you call a socio-technical problem, right? Here's McKinsey's take, or HBR's take on the problem we talked about, right? So going from the left to right, you go from real-time systems, operational systems, to warehouse type of systems, which ultimately then lead to fragmentation of data sets, which are sort of usage specific, and a data set really exists for a particular app, and you end up having even more fragmentation beyond the data warehouse. Whereas the domain-based data products approach really was to think of each of these domains as a product, as something that could be put out there with a life cycle of its own. But there is one vendor domain, one customer domain, one branch domain in this example. And therefore that replication of data and the fragmentation of data doesn't continue beyond the systems of record and the data platform layer. I think this, of course, an idealized picture, right? The approach that Zhamak suggests was a little bit more democratic, right? It was about teams owning their data as a product and really improving it over time, so that, let's say, the vendor product, right? It attracts consumption, as opposed to being a hardcore. This, is sort of a directive that this is the only place where vendor data is available, regardless of the quality. Her approach is by looking at it as a product. It's not just about centralization. Actually, it's not about centralization at all. That's a technology play. This is really about having that vendor data be a high quality, always improving product that then becomes the most attractive place for somebody to go and consume that vendor data, right? And it's a subtle difference, but I think it's a very, very important difference, which talks to kind of the socio-technical aspect of this thing.
Are we allowed to ask questions, or we wait?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to make this a discussion. Yeah, absolutely.
Could you go back to the previous slide, please? Yeah. You mentioned data products by domain, right? But there's so much value in cross-domain integration. I mean, all these data sets are not siloed. Absolutely. A customer requires product requires some vendor information, employees require product information. How do you solve for cross-domain capabilities? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, but I think that's if you just do a surface reading of the proposal, then I think you don't see a lot of like interrelationship kind of context in there, which our claim is the reason we think something like Reltio is an interesting place to solve for this is because relationships, I mean, it's in our name, for example, right? Reltio.
Yeah.
So fully agree, right? And I think the important thing here is not to gloss over those details, because you can back yourself into a corner. Mike, or I see Matthew, you were there. Anybody would like to add to that point of view?
Yeah, I would just add that as you're looking at this and these individual kind of entity pieces as products, like the way I perceive this, there's value in each of these pieces, and then there's separate products, which are compositions of each of these individual pieces. So we may have a vendor and a branch product that are separate, and then we may have a vendor branch combined product that we deliver, which has that relationship capability in it, where now, instead of just making each one distinct, we're also managing our quality and our exposure rates around the relationship side of it too. So you can sort of think of these as building blocks, and these are the lower level pieces, and then we build composite pieces on top of them, which we treat as end-to-end things.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt in between,
No,
right?
go ahead.
If you go back, I'm sorry to extend the discussion.
No,
I
please do.
think, yeah, one of the point would be, and that's where the little bit of contradiction lies, right? If you look
Mhm.
into what Zamak has proposed in the data mesh architecture.
Mhm.
Now, the debate is that, if you look into the master element, like customer, I'll
Mhm.
take an example, who
Mhm.
would own it, whether the central data team would own it or the domain team would own it, right? Now, if you look
Mhm.
into that, your customer 360 as a data product
Mhm.
would not make sense for a sales department without owning the customer master, for example, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, you are losing out the value of enhancing a customer data with information coming from your supply chain, for example, right?
Mhm.
And so in that case, who who should own it? Master element. I'm going beyond technology. I'm
Right.
looking into right who is whether it would be a domain specific or some of the entities you would leave it to the central team to govern and even manage.
Yeah.
So that I feel a debate needs to happen in the data community to see what would be the right approach. And I also interested to understand what would be your perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Like, where do you draw the line? So, uh, the governance piece, I think it's very clear, right? That needs to be centralized. If you try to federate governance to each one of the functions, that leads to a lot of chaos, of course, right? And so, I think this also goes into sort of how much of the data mesh dogma is around centralized versus not centralized, and to me that is a little bit of a red herring. Ultimately, this is about data sets that you can own them at different granularity, right? For example, the we can consider data set to be a source in sort of our universe, in the MDM universe, right? A customer data set can be a source. There can be a different source, but ultimately the authoritative source, we have the capability to resolve that to what can be a um, uh, global data product, right? And so I think that having that flexibility is really, really important. And we think that is the missing piece here, where we can have that sort of hierarchical discussion, if you will, where every team in a very large organization, just conceptually speaking, right, can own their piece of what they think is authoritative, but ultimately there's enough governance to say all of that filters through to the truthful sort of master or the truth that then be consumed by all downstream systems. I think it's drawing that line on consumption, which I think is where the discussion needs to be. Again,
Ansh,
Mike, Matthew, Cook, anyone?
can you just go back one slide to compare this
Mhm.
drawing to the previous one?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And I know David had a question. So, David,
Yeah,
do you
go
want to
ahead.
ask your question?
No, it was just a comment earlier when you were showing, customer, vendor, these various data products,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the question about cross domain. And it was just that Dargani, would call that source aligned, these sort of products, as opposed to higher level. But
Yeah.
you basically made that point using different terminology.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that there's so much passion around this topic, right? At Data Driven, I would love to have a work stream that really sort of dives into these questions, and maybe we can come out of there with a point of view that we can publish. Okay, so that leads us to, okay, what is this treat data as a product? What is it, right? And I picked out a few of the statements that really resonated with me, right? And it is about team, it is about their assets, treating them as products. But most importantly, it's about a product exists for a customer and being able to identify who that customer is and working backwards from there. As an example here, the data scientists and ML teams, data engineers, all of them are consumers of these data sets, and therefore the product has to meet their need. And the sort of originator data team really is becoming a product team with an identified product owner or a product manager that's aware of the customers and really continuously improving the precision and the fidelity of the data, or the fit of the data in general terms to their needs, right? Here's another one from the Get Census. I'm sorry, I should have put Brian's name up here, but it's data as a product, the concept of applying key product development principles, which is identifying and addressing unmet needs, agile solutioning, iterations, reusability to data projects. And talking to a lot of you, that is already in the mix. These are not new concepts and not new to the data space either, but a lot of us apply them at different granularity, and sort of the uniformity of adoption within a large enterprise may be very different. But let's say that's what we're trying to power, right? And so the one-on-one on this is there are 4 elements of what makes up a successful data mesh. Ownership, I think we touched on that a little bit, right? The line on that, I think, is a little bit context dependent, but having the flexibility there and having a framework that can draw the line for your specific enterprise, I think, is very, very important. Data as a product, and we'll delve into this here in a second, very specific characteristics of what it makes technically data that as it transforms into a product, what characteristics does it need to have? Discoverable, it's addressable, trustworthy, describes itself. There are standards that are followed globally, and this sort of gets into governance. And of course, there's secure access available. The third piece is self-serve data platforms. That's it's a very interesting sort of approach. It's a general manifesto. If you look at early Zhamak's early work or her book that came out last year, but it doesn't dictate what technology to use, and we can fall back into using data warehouses, or we can be forward-leaning and really think about how to use other capabilities, and of course from a self-serving point of view, data management products to really be able to create a differentiator there. But this is all about lifecycle management, discoverability, and it's being able to enforce data contracts. And then, of course, federated governance, right? As we touched upon that, that is something, again, huge discussion about federated. How far do you go? Where are the standards set? And, are those ultimately how much teeth you have in that governance capability? And of course, a lot of it does depend on how regulated the industry is, amongst other things. Any thoughts on, I'm sure everybody's read the data mesh paper, so any thoughts on this scope here? Do you see some of these being more important than others over time?
I do have a question on this.
Yeah, Dave.
What I wasn't seeing in the McKinsey slide, and I haven't really heard you speak of, is the fact that you mentioned the origination systems. Well, the real origination systems of a lot of data are these operational
100%
transactional systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they exist. I mean, certainly in a large ongoing enterprise,
mm-hmm.
they exist. They've been created. They're generating lots of data,
mm-hmm.
and what happens in at least one very large company is, there's a central data team that works to just basically publish,
mm-hmm.
The internals of that, say, Postgres or Oracle database
mm-hmm.
to Snowflake or Teradata or wherever, right? And pretty much in the same form. And so one of the things that I think is most important that Dagani makes is this distinction between the operational data that's inside, the data on the inside, as
mm-hmm.
it's called, by
absolutely
going back 15 years, to
mm-hmm.
data on the outside, which is,
mm-hmm.
Analytic data to be consumed by these other folks. And that's the product, right?
Absolutely.
The data on the inside is not a product. That's sort of the raw materials of the product.
100%.
And it's not even necessary that it's one team
yes.
that creates the operational system and that creates the data product, because it's two different sets of customers. And I think that's an important, at least in my view, that's a very important thing to bring out. So I just wanted to.
David, I think that's spot on, and it's so yesterday I was on a plane from somewhere to somewhere, and I took out the Kimball book. Now we all have O'Reilly subscriptions, so all books are available all the time. So I pulled out the Kimball book for some reason, and even now that data warehousing toolkit book, I think is like the Dragon book on compilers. It's just this classic that captures this essence really well. And the line I remember from there now is the dimensional data that comes out, that is derived from the operational systems. Your warehousing or analytical capabilities are only as good as the dimensional data. When I read it 15 years ago, I didn't really realize what that meant, but now working at Reltio, that's definitely top of mind. So absolutely, that transformation between operational and analytical data. And this also triggers another thought. Mike and I were having this discussion where, where does Reltio sit? Like, if you go back, sorry, I'm going off script here for a second, but I think it's super interesting. It's like, where does Reltio sit in this whole discussion, right? What is the change that we're trying to bring to the world, whereas sort of what this picture looks like? And from our point of view, we are right here between system. The ideal place where you put a systems or next generation MDM solution like us is somewhere right here between systems of record and your data warehouse. You actually don't even go out to the next layer, because this assumes that your data products would be published within a warehouse. But some of the advantages we're going to talk about, really, if your entity data is streaming from your operational systems directly into a next generation MDM system, and that's where your data as a product is available, even for your data warehouses to be consistent, right? Why incur that delay of processing through that whole warehousing step?
Can I ask a question here?
Sure, of course.
So the question here is like, you have left to right your operational systems of records and your data platform, data products. But for that thing to be actionable, you need to write back to your systems of record.
Absolutely.
So in your diagram, I'm not trying to think like, where does this, how do you make it actionable? Like,
so this is McKinsey's diagram. Just to be clear, I don't fully agree with it, right? This is the industry picture of sort of the left or operational to analytical flow. But I think that's absolutely right. And this is if anything flows in the opposite direction, I guess we've given it the label of reverse ETL. But without that, nothing really works. So again, our view of the world is, a system like next generation MDM system is right here. And in real time, it has the APIs available or the integration capabilities available to update or inject or allow lookups from these operational systems. So no disagreement. I think that feedback loop really is critical to accelerating the pace at which any of these data transformations can actually be brought about. Mike, I'm sure you have a point of view on that.
Yeah, I think that this is a really key thing, right? We've seen a lot of at least I read a lot of the diagrams and papers for this have really focused on the analytical side, right? How do we get that operational data? How do we make it available? And so we can do all of these different analytical pieces. But there is a loop back where that operational data becomes a product that becomes operational data for the next system without going into the analytics layer at all, right? Data from my sales system, my operational, point of sale system, comes in and becomes a customer piece of the product that flows into my logistics system so that I can ship the order that I just bought half a second ago in my POS or on my website. So I think that loop back is something that at least we feel is pretty important in order to start really extracting real value out of this data and these products.
Just a follow-up question here, not a thing. You have every organization have a lot of systems like SAP, Salesforce, Viva, you name it, success factors, etc. Now, each of these systems have their own security model. Now, as an organization, I need to be able to harmonize that, like say Ansh can access everything, but Chris Deltel is only allowed to access data from Texas, right?
Mhm.
So how is Reltio addressing that?
So we don't solve the problem for your entire data landscape, right?
No, I'm not asking, but like you have some ideas or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the point of enforcement that you can provide, of course, is within, if you have Reltio implemented, there's very fine-grained control, at an API level, at the UI level, and so on, right? So I assume you're familiar with that. But I think where you could go with, if, again, this is sort of our view of the world, right? Any piece of data that's coming in from the left, trending to the right, it can stop at a next-gen MDM system, and you create a unique ID for every single piece of data for every single entity, and then any downstream system can refer to that data, using that fine-grained access control, and therefore the propagation of data you can sort of stop it from just replicating everywhere, and instead just reference it by pointer, just conceptually speaking, right? This is where our customers who are compliance focused, specifically GDPR, CCPA, sort of privacy focused, right? They tend to go down that path where one of their key goals is sort of limiting this data proliferation downstream, and that's one approach. Drew, Mike, any other thoughts on that?
I think that at a high level, but we do have customers today that are essentially sort of doing this within, even in their governance controls and their stewardship controls on this data, where I can't see, I'm living in Germany and I can only see data from Germany. And so we really look at how do we integrate with the existing SSO structure, how do we integrate with those existing groups where we've already planned out kind of these roles across our enterprise, and how do we associate access controls and tie them to them. So we look at that from our security framework for leveraging the Reltio APIs in order to restrict that access.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so again, I assume everybody here is very, very familiar with our core data flows, but still wanted to lay it out there, right? At a high level, system like Reltio is somewhere in the middle. We provide that canonical data model that can help you map both your first party data and third party data, sort of map all of your first party data to that source of truth, but then also enrich it with third party data, and sort of other data sets that you may want to load into the system, ultimately with the goal of being able to activate this data through some system of engagement, for example, that a CDP or Salesforce, or a system, BIM or something of that effect, which ultimately in its full realization looks something like this, right? Where in this case, a CRM, ERP, a marketing system, data lake is feeding into Reltio. We're pulling in third-party data from data providers. Take your pick, right? Easy integration with any and all of them. But ultimately, our goal is to help you power the initiatives that you're running, whether it's sort of marketing and growth related initiatives on the left-hand side, or risk and compliance, sort of we touched on that on the right-hand side, or running efficiency related initiatives somewhere in the middle, right? But the reason I put it up there is if you look at it, you can already sort of look backwards from the consuming applications seeking both that sort of data and relationships within that data as a product, and therefore build upon that source of truth. And I think this is to I apologize, I don't remember who exactly asked the question, but you were talking about relationships, which are so important to preserve and be aware of. And that's really sort of our value proposition going outwards, that it's not just a data set that is somehow domain specific, absent of relationships, but really that is the power that this sort of capability brings to the table. Yeah. And so we wanted to spend maybe 20 minutes. Yeah, we're doing good on time. So just wanted to spend 20 minutes on, all right, this is all great, but I own Reltio. I want to either be ahead of the curve and publish data as a product, or I'm being asked to publish data as a product. How should I approach it with Reltio? So we're going to do a little thing here, just because I don't know if we can stream 2 screens at the same time, but I would request you, if you're interested, just take a screenshot of this. We'll walk through each one of this, but we'd rather show you a demo and walk you through the UI just to make it visual. So I'm going to transfer control over to Mike here in 10 seconds, but I'll give you a few seconds. Just take a screenshot so that you can track along as we're sort of going down this list. This is essentially the criteria list for data as a product and what it means from Zamak's definition, and then how we think you can implement that particular piece in Reltio. Anybody needs more time? Okay. Mike, over to you.
All right, let me share my screen, and hopefully this doesn't have any challenges. So we want to walk through each of these pieces because I think that, as we look at that overall data product, right, there's very clear kind of structure to what is a product, how do we, what are the pieces that we need to put together for it. And so, as Ansh said, we are pretty convinced that a lot of our customers, a lot of you, are doing this today, or doing half of this today, or doing a third of it today, but you may not be positioning this as a product, or you may not be looking at all of these capabilities to leverage and really make that available. And it looks like it just crashed again. I'm sorry, guys. Let's try this again. So I'll hop right into this. So the first piece really is around discoverability, right? How do we make this data available across the enterprise? How do we make sure that your customers inside of your organization can find it and make this available, and know where to go, know it's available, know what kind of attributes you have, and different information about that product. We are looking at leveraging all the different third-party catalogs in order to persist this data. And so what I'm showcasing here is one of our Reltio Integration Hub recipes for integrating the Reltio data structure with a data catalog, in this case, Calibra. But we're looking at, how can we integrate this with pretty much every catalog? And so our goal here is that you're already making changes and you're already storing this data from all of your sources to figure out what all the different attribution I have for these things, these entities, and these objects in Reltio. How do I automate that to make it discoverable for in tooling that people are already using across the enterprise? And so you're confident that Reltio Integration Hub is the answer to that, to be able to make that available in an automated fashion to your catalogs. And the next piece really is focusing on, how to make things addressable. How do we find stuff? I know that I have a customer data product that's released across my organization, but I want to find a specific customer. So how do we make that available? Right. Today, we already have capabilities around search. Right. I can search across all of my customers. I can search for Betty Boop, and I can come in here. I can do this via API or via UI. I can find this object. But once I find these objects, there's a few things that I think that are really unique here, right? One, we've already applied that common entity ID. And so Ansh mentioned this. We're starting to see customers, as they want to have more fine-grained access controls around data, or maybe manage data propagation, that they are propagating this entity ID or propagating our Reltio ID across their enterprise to refer back to this person. So now in the future, I can always get back to this individual. I can always get back to this instance of this product wherever I want across my organization. If I'm in my sales system or I'm in my logistics system, I know that I'm talking about Betty Boop, right? I know I'm talking about the same person, the same customer across those enterprises.
So Mike, this is like very granular, right? You can pick out a specific entity and address that. I mean, essentially, I think one of our core principles is every single piece of data in the system has to be addressable through a URI. But if you level it up a little bit, right? In terms of just an entity, like how many entities, not how many, but how many types of entities do we have in the system? That is available through an API, easily queryable, right? Just a list of all entities.
Yep. So that's available through our metadata and configuration APIs. And I think that leads in, that's kind of back on that discoverable side is we want to publish that automatically into all of your catalogs so that everybody who's maybe not having a direct access to Reltio can see all of that and see what is the possibility. Oh, I didn't even know there was a customer data product. I didn't even know I had information about all of my vendors that I can get access to. Great. Now here's the thing that I found. Now, where do I go to get that? Oh, I go get that in Reltio. Now I find the specific customer or vendor or supplier that I'm interested in. And now I have an ID to reference them very, very granularly.
Yeah. And a further out thought, right? We assume, this is assuming that everybody has a data catalog of choice at this point that you have implemented, right? But for customers, Mike, who may not have a data catalog, could they use could they create an entity type within Reltio, which is a data set or something to that effect, and get attributes in there effectively like a poor man's catalog, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, we have the core configuration APIs, which I would say is probably the best way to go about that, and make that available through the security controls to make that read only, so you're not exposing your entire configuration structure to anybody to edit, but certainly making that available to read and consume across the enterprise is something that you could do today, even if you don't have a catalog.
And Azure purview as well? Is that possible?
Yes. So we look at this as kind of two pieces into this kind of methodology. We have the left side of this frame, which is the Reltio data structure and metadata config. And then we have the right side, which is, in our view, every catalog, right? And so we are specifically focused on how do we integrate this with a few of the big catalogs. And so Glue, Purview, and Calibra are three that we're doing right now. But our view is that this should be easily configurable for you to hook into any catalog. So whether that's Elation, whether that's a brand new catalog that does not exist today that comes out tomorrow. I mean, I think there's lots of different companies that are releasing catalogs every 4 seconds. Our focus is that you should be able to point this at your catalog, and the Reltio side of the extraction of all the metadata is the same either way, no matter where it ends up on the other side, and make that available to you through Reltio Integration Hub.
Yeah, we'd also love to get feedback. Shoot us an email, let us know through the community. Maybe we can put a poll out there, right? In terms of how would you like us to prioritize our catalog sequencing, right? Because we have the metadata capability, export capability now. We have the APIs, we have the integration hub approach where you pretty easily, low code, no code, any of your engineers can go in and sort of build this integration, right? But we also want to have some recipes that are finished out there for you to consume. So we'd love to just get input from you on what you're using and would like to see prioritized.
Go through this first.
I would say let's finish the demo pieces just so that we can level set, and happy to either answer questions offline or do another session, just sort of more of a ask me anything format.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Mike?
So kind of get back into some of the other focuses and pieces here. We talked about making things discoverable. We'll talk about through catalogs and making that available through the metadata APIs. We've talked about making things searchable and addressable. How do we get from that high level of I didn't even know what my products are. Okay, I found a product that I'm interested in. Now how do I search into that to be able to figure out the individual or the customer that I care about? How do I reference them across my enterprise from that point on? Now I have all of that, but this is making that exposable. That's mostly consumption pieces, right? These are people that are your customers are going to be leveraging that in order to find the data they care about. But us as data product owners want to be able to publish stats to convince other people in our organizations that this is good data, right? You can't just say, and I think we've all been in situations where we've tried to mandate, you have to use this data, this is the way to go, this is the thing you have to leverage, and how well that works out politically across large organizations. I don't think I've ever seen that actually work effectively. People just do whatever they're going to do anyway. And part of this is about, as we shift to think this out of product, we're really selling this data into our organization. So how do we sell it? And how do we convince all of the other people in the organization this is useful? This is something they should be standardizing on, things that they should be leveraging. One of the core components of that, in our view, is data quality. I can't trust the data if I don't know the quality of that data. So we feel that leveraging capabilities like the data quality dashboard allows you to be able to come in here and say, okay, I want to take location data. I want to publish location data as a product across my organization. Here's all of the systems that make up that data. So I have data from my shipping, my web, my ERP system. So customers can understand, oh, we have a pretty broad data set. We have stuff from all of these different places that's available. But then we can drill into things like, I want to look at address line 1 and see what my fill rates are. I want to see what my fill rate over time is. So if I know my data product for location has a fill rate for address line 1 that drops, I know my product quality has dropped. I want to be able to address that immediately so that my customers across the organization don't notice this, right? So now we can start publishing quality stats, which are really about getting people on board and convincing them this is a good thing. There's a lot of value here, instead of just saying you have to use this data, right? That's just not a effective approach in our opinion. But these dashboards can be exposed not only to internally for stewards to look at and say, what should I address? But this should be an outreach piece. This should be a selling component for you to be able to position these products across your organization. So the next piece that we kind of have highlighted here is around self-describing. This is a real focus on how do we redefine data structures, how do we make sure that makes sense for people that are consuming that data. The way we are approaching this primarily is through our velocity packs. And so I'm not sure how many on the call have spent a lot of time looking at the velocity packs, but this is a pretty strong investment for us at Reltio. And you can see here, these are 6 of our initial velocity packs, which are structured not just as data models, but full integration components built around them. We look at this as sort of a metadata product that we are exposing to you to be able to take this to release your data products across your organization. So this becomes the standard and the canonical structure for how you can publish those products everywhere without you having to do that from scratch. The next piece really talking about is around global standards and interoperability. Most of our customers are doing this today, right? We have a data structure. So we have a customer that's coming in from a bunch of different systems. This could be coming in from systems different, all across your enterprise, from different regions and different geographies. And let me move this around real quickly. Oops. So this data is being joined together from a bunch of different sources, right? Part of this is, how do we stitch data together? How do we make sure that we understand the actual product in the end? This instance of this product is Betty Boop. But Betty Boop comes from mobile applications, comes from website, comes from e-commerce, comes from cleansing and third-party enrichment sources. And so Reltio is already doing this for you today, right? We think that we can really take advantage of this both globally and across geographies to organize data together, across different systems to organize things together, across different lines of business and organize them together, and then make that lineage available so that your customers can once again trust this product, right? We want to set the standard that this, in the end, this Betty Boop piece is the standard, but it came from all of these different places. It has all of these different source values. Here's how it looks across those sources so that we can trust that data at the core enterprise product level. And then the last piece is around security. And we talked about this a little bit previously. We look at our security and our metadata security layer as a way for you to control propagation and control data access to these data products. You've already spent tons of time across your organization building out SSO groups and SSO structures in order to be able to restrict access for people in certain geographies. Well, we think that the real path forward here for these data products is let's take advantage of that. We'll look into your existing SSO structure, get your existing groups that you've already built, you've already spent time on defining, and then how do we relate that into the product itself? So this way, people in Germany can only see German data from Germany. People from the US can only see US data. And that can be managed not just at the stewardship level, which is where we see a lot of our customers focus today, at the governance and stewardship access, but how do we make this available across your entire enterprise easily and rapidly? You don't want to be creating 75,000 user accounts inside of a product, right? You've already done that. You've done that inside of your SSO environment. Let's just take advantage of that. And so I kind of blew through those core pieces, but I think the kind of crux of this is that data products and data mesh, we're treating data as a product data mesh, is a kind of a relatively new concept, but lots of you are already doing this. You're already doing this 50%, or you're already doing this 60%, right? I think it's not a technology problem. We have the technology to support this. It's a logical business problem. How do we think about these things in order to make this available and make this real inside of your organizations?
Absolutely. Mike, you want to relinquish screen?
I will.
And so to that point, right, it's I think sometimes, especially if you're new to sort of this way of thinking about data, there is I still can't take it over, Mike. So datamesh-architecture.com is a really, really good resource. And they have a data product canvas that I really like, that you can use on your journey, right? Either sort of starting from scratch or sort of reformatting what you already have, but do start from the right-hand side of this canvas where it's the use case and the consumer clearly identified, move left over to, what outputs do they require to satisfy their particular needs. Metadata, sort of, this whole notion of trust data through quality metrics, operational metrics, observability that's built into the data set. And that's what Mike demonstrated to you, right? For us, it's no different. It's included in the platform, that data quality, observability piece, trending piece, it's all in there. And then in the middle, it was very interesting for us when we noticed it the first time. It's not just about data product design. It's not just about ingestion and storage, but really wrangling, cleaning, transformations, enrichment, augmentation. And this really starts to sound very much like what you're doing in your MDM system today, right? And then go all the way back to identifying the source systems and sort of the multiple input sort of interface formats that we already sort of handle as part of our data operations. So just thought this was a good tool to have if you're not familiar with it. And that whole website, Data Mesh Architecture, I think is really, really been well done. One more quick resource offer here. So we joined the Data Mesh Learning community as a platinum sponsor. So Zamak's company, as well as Reltio and a couple of other folks, we are really leaning into this in a big way and sort of, putting money where our mouth is in terms of actually sponsoring the learning community. It's a free resource. If you go there, there's of course getting started and a bunch of this 101 sort of principles laid out. But what I love the most are the user journeys, which is from practitioners like yourselves. There is probably 50, even more now. There's some examples here on the right of how that particular company sort of went down this path of implementing a data mesh. It is not Reltio specific. It really is, every one of them really uses a different combination of technologies. And if you go through that, you can evaluate for yourself the veracity of some of the things that we've just talked about. And we'd love feedback from all of you on, our way of thinking, because, we of course, we have an opinionated point of view, but the broader idea here is that we can move the whole industry forward if we can align and learn from each other. And this is just one of the resources that allow us all to do that. So please do engage with that. We're going to start sponsoring meetups, sub-conferences, and really be part of this conversation in a big way going forward. I think that's all I had. We have a couple minutes maybe for questions, feedback, what you'd like to see in the future.
I have a question here. A lot of our end users are very familiar with Excel, right? And you have APIs which you can do that. If somebody in Reltio can make these as Power Query and Excel templates like you have it for Postman collections, it will be very useful for our end users.
Okay.
Because they can put the data in Excel and then they can query real time to Reltio.
So you can do a lot of that today. You can export data today
but it's not consumable.
But it's not. Yeah,
it's not consumable by the end users. By you putting it in Power Query, a lot of people are very familiar with Excel, so they can just put an Excel table and then just put Power Query, join it, and get their results very quickly.
Okay, as an export destination for us. Yeah, that's
no, not an export, not an export definition. I'm saying like you have curl, right? In your API, you have curl, you have Python.
Sure.
Of course, you have Postman, right? So what I make a template, like in Postman, you have collections, right? So
yeah, sure. Got it. You want Excel as a two-way interface through some sort of a
but have a template initially. Can just start as just as a template, so I can query for the relationships and that, and then if I have like a list of HCOs and HCPs, I just put it on Excel, make a table and Power Query it, right? And then I can join that Power Query to Reltio in real time and get my results quickly.
Okay.
It's a low
as a feature request. Understood.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone. Ansh and Mike for coming to another Reltio community show. Really great discussion today, and thank you for driving that, Ansh, and really do appreciate that. And please take the survey at the end, at the Zoom pop-up. Any feedback and all feedback is welcome. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week at the next community show. So thank you, everyone. Take care and have a great rest of the week.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.